Hello, welcome to Mental Health 5. My name is Dr. Suze Dukic, and today we're going to talk about why therapy works. So stay tuned. Hello, before I get started today talking about how therapy works or why therapy works, I'd like to give a shout out to a good friend and a fellow podcaster, Sherry Jackson. Her podcast is called Positive Living Using Simple Steps. I did an interview with her a couple of weeks ago, so go check her out. I think not only just for my interview, but she has some really good suggestions about simple things we can do in our daily life to help us live a more positive lifestyle. So check her out. So let's get on with today's topic. But first, as I have stated in previous episodes, my thoughts are my opinions, and I realize there's going to be other mental health providers that may disagree. Good for you. We're all entitled to our own opinion, and these are just some thoughts that I have based on my education and training, as well as my experience working with clients. So I just want to say that before. And then one thing I want to clear up is terms like therapy or psychotherapy and counseling. These are used interchangeably. I guess you also hear talk therapy. And so if you look psychotherapy up and counseling, there are some differences, but people use them interchangeably. I mean, technically, they refer to counseling. Mental health counseling is dealing with lighter problems. And then psychotherapy is defined closer to more deeper level problems, more serious mental health struggles. However, what I have found is people use those two terms interchangeably. And, you know, I'm a licensed mental health provider, and I do very little light counseling as it's defined. So probably another profession created that definition. But just want to make that clear as I talk, even throughout other episodes, I may use those terms interchangeably, only because that tends to be the trend. And so typically with therapy/counseling, it takes place with a licensed mental health professional, psychiatrist, psychologist, social worker, licensed counselor, marriage and family therapist. These, and I've mentioned these before, these are some professional licenses that vary from state to state and country to country. And so there's various types of treatment techniques, the way the therapist works with the client. And not all techniques work with all people. It really depends on the client's personality as well as the personality of the mental health worker. For example, if a client is kind of quiet, maybe withdrawn, and oftentimes when I see clients for the first time, they're very nervous if they've never been to a mental health provider before. And so if I have someone very quiet, withdrawn, scared, I tone my personality down a little bit because I'm an extrovert, I'm pretty outgoing, and I realize that can be overwhelming, first of all, for someone who's just very anxious or scared. And secondly, for someone that's more introverted and they need more of a softer voice, a little bit slower approach. And so I kind of adjust my personality to my clients. And so other therapists may be quiet and they don't talk much. And so this may bother the client that's a talker. And so all of that gives us information in the therapeutic session. Why a client's not talking, do they not feel comfortable with the therapist? Why is a therapist sharing a little too much personal information in the session? Well, the therapist still has some work to do. We are not supposed to be doing our work in a session with our clients. So that's just a couple of things on that. Like I said, there's different modalities of therapy, and I'm just going to briefly touch on things that I use, and then I'll talk about why I think therapy helps people. Some people, it's not an absolute thing, and so it doesn't work just for everyone. And so I guess I'll address that now. I think one of the reasons why therapy works for some people is it shows a person is committed to being better. They want to feel better. And so my personal belief is that a person who has a high sense of self-awareness, it's going to be easier to work for them, and it's going to be easier for them to work with the therapist because they're self-aware of when, their thought patterns go down the rabbit hole, as we say in the business sometimes, meaning dark. Maybe I get on a thought loop and I can't get these negative feelings out of my head. Or it could be more of an anxiety thought loop. And typically, although not absolute, is when we have very anxious thoughts in our head. They usually go something like this. Oh, I wonder what if? What if? What if my mate has another partner or they're cheating on me? What if my boss doesn't like my final project? Oh gosh, what if I lose my job? I can't pay my bills. Oh no, the world is going to end. Very negative thought loop we get in. It goes on and on and on. I'll talk more about thought loops and the brain in a future mini-series where we'll talk about the brain and mental health. But people get in this spiral or going down the rabbit hole. So one of my goals is to help people first realize that they're about to go down the rabbit hole. And so self-awareness is key. We need to know what our triggers are. Sometimes we don't know. When people tell me, my anxiety, it came out of nowhere, or I had a panic attack, it came out of nowhere. No, it doesn't come out of nowhere. You just might not have been aware of circumstances that led to that panic attack. And often it's not one event that can trigger a panic attack. People, I've said it before, I really believe human beings are resilient, and we go and we go and we go and we go. Well, if we're under a lot of stress, or maybe we're worried because Aunt Josephine is ill and we're worried about her or another family member. So we have personal stress. We have a lot of extra work put on us at work. We have career-oriented stress. Maybe my relationship at home with my significant other or my children or my siblings, maybe that's not going well. All these things can add up and put pressure on us. And so something that seems so slight that could trigger a panic attack, I just have a hard time believing it's that one thing. I think people become more vulnerable and susceptible to get really, really anxious or have a panic attack or go into a major depressive episode because of a combination of things, not necessarily one triggering point. Negative thoughts, or maybe my heart rate has went up somewhat, and my palms are clammy or sweaty. I mean, there's actual physical changes with some of these thought patterns, and maybe it's just realizing that before my anxiety is off the charts. So a few of the things that people can learn to be or track their own thought patterns and behaviors. Some of the things include black and white thinking. Black and white thinking, and I find this a lot in anxiety, is black and white thinking is no flexibility. It's either this or it's that. My partner's going to leave me or they're not. There's nothing in the middle. For example, like we need to work on our relationship, getting in that gray area so we can grow and develop as partners. No, that would be black and white thinking. Also absolutes. And what I mean by absolute language is very little room, if any, for flexible thinking. So absolute language might sound like this. He never helps me around the house with the chores, or she always is on my case. Now, when I ask, I work a lot with couples, when I ask one of them to elaborate, if they make a comment like this or similar, they will say, well, he never helps me with chores. He hasn't done anything. And, I just do everything and I work full time. Okay. Well, then the partner will speak up and say, I emptied the dishwasher last night. I packed the kids' lunches this morning. What do you mean I never help you? And so that gives us a place to explore and kind of see where she's coming from. And a side note here, again, I'll talk more about relationships in a future mini-series. A side note here is oftentimes when those absolute words or language comes up, it's really not about the topic. It's on a much deeper level. Maybe you don't see me. You're not acknowledging me. I'm not getting enough attention from you. So I'll focus on anything. But usually that type of language is going to come from a place of pain in a heart, and the person's hurting. And so their comments are extreme. So self-awareness in that would be starting to pay attention when I use words like that. And so I notice it and it's like, oh, wow, I did it. And so you might log that or keep track of that. So black and white thinking and absolutes. These are things that we can stop. Once they start, we can stop. One thing I use with myself I don't mind sharing is if I have a negative thought about someone or something or an event or whatever, I can usually catch it pretty quick, and I'll say, come on now, negative Nelly, stop it. Nope, got to stop. And I'll put a positive head in my thought or redirect and distract myself with something. So I call myself Negative Nelly when those things happen. But the thing is, the first step was being self-aware that it happens, and then you redirect your thought patterns. And again, we'll talk more about this in the future about the brain. But when we do things like that, when we attempt to change how our thought patterns are, we are actually rewiring our brain. We're changing the way we think. Now, this doesn't happen one time when you're self-aware. This is practice, just like anything. Practice, practice, practice. And so we'll talk more about that in the future on our brain mini-series. And so a few other things that can be something, if someone's self-aware, can pick up on, or something they can work on once they learn to recognize it. Negative self-talk. Oh gosh, this is probably at the root of, I hate to use absolute language, it's probably at the root of many disorders, especially anxiety and a lot of the depressive disorders. The first thought in someone's mind is negative. We all do it. And so the trick and the key is learning that I just had a negative thought about myself. And so then trying to change that or redirect to a positive thought. So that might look like, let's see. Let's say it's in an employment environment, and I've been working on this project, big spreadsheet for my boss. And so I'm really nervous driving into work that morning thinking, I've got so many hours, they better be proud of what I've done, all my commitment to this spreadsheet. I've worked so hard, this has been overwhelming, they're not going to like it. I just know it. I probably should spend more time on it. I hate spreadsheets. I hate Excel. This sucks. This is going to be terrible. Why did I choose marketing? There's no way I should have went into teaching like my parents told me. I'm such a failure. Okay, so that's just probably a crazy little stream of thought there, but it's just an example of how people, they have the self-doubt first, and then they start really going down that rabbit hole of negative self-talk, which can make us feel really bad and not proud of who we are or not proud of the work we've done. And so that's another thing I try to help clients be more self-aware when it happens and maybe fill in that space with a positive comment. So based on the scenario I just did, a person, say they have that first negative thought, I'm a loser, I should have never went down this career path. A positive rebuttal or response to that could be, yeah, but you have worked so hard, and this spreadsheet may not be perfect, but you have put a lot of time in it, and it's probably going to be pretty close. And so if it's not perfect, then you can revise it and make it better. So that, again, that's just off the top of my head. You've can probably relate with what I'm talking about, because I think all of us have had that negative self-talk. And the key to building your self-confidence is to replace those negative comments or thoughts with something positive, even if you don't believe them at first. Eventually, we learn to appreciate ourselves and hopefully believe it. Now, that phrase I just said comes out of my mouth pretty easily. It takes a lot of work. Excuse me. It takes a lot of work to become more self-aware of our negative patterns with our thoughts. And so another thing that I try to help people with is imposter syndrome. Anyone can have this. You question and doubt yourself. You've worked hard on something and you come back and think, well, what if they figure out I'm not really that smart? Or let's say someone built a piece of furniture, and when they get done, a thought might be, I don't know what I'm doing. This isn't very good. I should have just let my wife buy a piece of furniture instead of trying to build it. I mean, she thinks I know what I'm doing. I really don't. I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, so there's another negative thought pattern that I'm not good enough, or they're going to find out I don't know what I'm going to do. So it's kind of this mysterious that they're going to find out. Find out what? What is it they're going to find out? And I'll share this. I was right out of my master's level graduate program, and I was under supervision, and I would had a great supervisor, Dr. Angela Thompson in Nashville. But anyway, I was early in my postgraduate career, and we were doing supervision and talking, and I was telling her about a client situation, and she said, wait a minute. And I don't remember exact words, but she goes, what's up? You seem different today. And in supervision, we're not really doing counseling. It falls more on consulting, but your supervisor will try to support you, or if they pick up something that you're struggling with. So she asked me some type of question along there, and I don't even remember how I got started, but ultimately I said, I'm just afraid they're going to find out. And it came out of nowhere. And she goes, find out about what? I said that I'm not really that smart. I don't know if I can do this. I feel like I'm faking it when I'm with clients, but I go home, I read textbooks. I'm not quite sure I know what I'm doing. And so I think the key phrase is, I think they're going to find out, or what if they find out? And anyway, after I said it, she said, who's they? And she was saying it much more gentle and calm than I am. But who is they, Susie? Who's going to find out what? And so I tell her my insecurities. And then she gave me some words of support, and I kind of kicked out of that. But it has popped back up over the years. I think it's normal in people. But I think where the skill comes in is recognizing when you're starting to go down that path and pulling out. And again, words of affirmation, might be, look at what you've done. You are smart, or you are a good craftsman. You are good. And so being able to redirect those imposter thoughts into something positive. And then the last one, and by no means is this an inclusive list, just a few things that come to mind. Relationship issues. And so I'll have clients come in that are really struggling at home with their mate, and pretty much right off the bat, I tell them we can't do couples counseling without the partner here. And I just want them to be clear that I can't help them with a relationship issue. But one thing I can help them with is what their reaction is. Help them realize their role in the relationship. Maybe they need help establishing boundaries. But when it comes to really the more intimate aspects of a relationship, I can't do that with just one person. Again, you can help with a few skills for that person. And so in that case, I'm usually trying to encourage them to bring their partner in. And sometimes they do, and sometimes, they come back and tell me the partner said they don't have the issues that they do. And so that's usually a red flag. But I'm not seeing their partner, so I can't comment too much on that. So I work best I can with my client individually to help them be the best person that they can be. So where do these negative thought patterns come from. Again, it's not exact science right now, but I think human beings are so complex and the brain is fascinating. And we know so little. We know a lot about it, but there's so much more to explore. So anyway, have to remind myself that's for a future mini-series. Okay, so all these things I just listed may be connected to, well, in my opinion, they are connected to messages we received as children. And, some of these messages, it doesn't mean that your parents were bad people or your caregivers were bad people. It's just often parents do the best they can with what they learned as a child. And sometimes we don't have the tools to maybe be the healthiest parent we can be. And so therefore the child, which is true, and I don't care how perfect your household was, no homes are perfect. And so our thoughts and our behaviors of today or in the current time are connected to these messages we received as a child. And some of these can look like this. Maybe we were ignored. We weren't good enough. And I know some attitudes in my generation was, children spoke when they were spoken to, very authoritarian perspective. Children can be ignored. Maybe a parent or parents are emotionally disconnected. They may be struggling with their own issues of depression or relationship issues. And so the child may be fed and have shelter, but they're not getting that emotional connection. So this can result in later on in life that I wasn't good enough. What was wrong with me? Also, if a parent or a caregiver leaves a very, very young child, they don't have the mental capacity to understand why they're not coming back. And I can name many times where a client has told me, one of their first memories is seeing their mother or their father walk out the door and never come back. And one sad story, which really touched me, was working with a person in their mid-30s. And we were talking about some of the past trauma, and I asked them to tell me their very first memory. And it was homework. So when they come back, they said, well, the very first memory, I was about 5 or 6, and I can remember sitting on my front porch at my grandmother's house, and I watched my father drive away in a car, and I didn't understand what was going on. And I just remember how sad that was. It was like I knew he was never coming back. And so things like that, I think children are resilient, and they may get through their childhood with some of these traumas and even more severe trauma, but things show up, behaviors and thoughts show up later in life that sometimes can make it difficult for them to deal with life stresses. And so another way messages are received as children are the lack of trust. Maybe a child can't trust adults that they were around as a child. They weren't safe, either physically, sexually, or emotionally. They were not safe. And so children look for their primary caregivers to provide them safety and security, and sometimes that's not there. And so a child may develop the perspective that the world is a very scary place, and how can I trust anyone? Everyone's out to get me, that kind of thing. And so I see that a lot in my practice, especially dealing with fear or anxiety. Another reason may be an emotionally distant parent. You have that lack of connection. And during this time, our brains are in prime form genetically. It's wiring for connection. Neurotransmitters, all these things are starting to connect. But if we're not learning how to do that in a healthy way, then it may distract that proper wiring in the brain. And so that's something we may have to work on later in life to get those connections solid and positive. And so, again, we'll dive deeper into the brain's role in a future mini-series. Another reason could be control. If some of these things I previously mentioned, if I don't feel safe or connected, then I need to control. I need to control to make sure my environment is predictable and and I'm in control. And so how that might look as with a child is maybe they line up all their army men or Barbie dolls in a straight line, and they have to be in that line. Or they place their teddy bears or other toys on their bed a certain way. Children can develop this on their own just based on some of the shaky foundation of the household they're in. And so this can develop into an OCD or obsessive compulsive disorder symptoms as the child grows. And children can be diagnosed with this, which this is a very serious anxiety disorder. And I cannot imagine being a parent helping a child through that. But if it doesn't develop as a child, it can develop later in life. So no control as a child. Now I'm obsessed with control. One of the biggest things I work with anxiety is they may not be obsessed and would not meet criteria for a diagnosis of OCD. But people, for example, imposter syndrome, I don't want them to find out about me, so I'm going to do everything right. I'm going to be perfect, perfect, perfect. Well, no such thing, folks. And so, when I am trying to poke, and when I say poke my clients, I'm trying to push them a little to get out of their comfort zone and try something new. Inevitably, they will come back with, well, how do I know that's going to work? How do I know that person won't reject me if I ask them out for coffee? How do I know my boss won't fire me if I ask for a raise? And I say you don't. I mean, we can't predict the future. But if I can control and predict, then I feel safer. Therefore, my anxiety stays lower. Well, that's what they think anyway. But that's not how it works. Because number one, you can't control. You can't control everything in your world. And part of good mental health is being flexible. Part of good mental health is being able to roll with it if plans change without your anxiety shooting off the chart. Now, any of us could be anxious if we show up for an appointment and we are told, well, you're an hour early and you've got another appointment right after that. So it's like, oh, crap, I messed this up. Anybody could be anxious over unexpected events in our life. That's normal. Anxiety is normal. But it's when we just really get off the charts and get really super anxious because of something that happened that was not in the plans for that day. So you might be wondering, after all this jibber jabber I've been doing the last few minutes, Suze, you're not telling us why therapy works. All I have is an opinion, and here are some of those things. I think, number one, it shows if I make an appointment with someone, I'm going to talk to someone, I finally decided I'm ready. That's intentionality. That means I'm committed to me, or I'm starting to be. So I make that appointment, and then showing up. That's another important step toward your commitment of being in better health. And so I think that alone shows a lot of courage, which some people really struggle with courage. So I think taking that step and the fear of the unknown, we can't have courage without fear. And so if I know I'm struggling, and I know I've talked about the stigma around mental health in the previous episode, but if I know I'm struggling, I'm very insecure or self-conscious or ashamed, because in my culture or in my family, going to a counselor is frowned upon, I'm going to be extremely nervous if I finally break out of that and decide I'm going to talk to somebody. And so I think that's huge for a lot of people. It is so courageous. And then also, clients making a commitment to be better. It's like, I guess one way I can think about it is if you start a new project, whether you're building something, you're painting something, or you're doing a new spreadsheet with a bunch of numbers, when you finish it, there's a sense of accomplishment. And on that journey, that project, event, whatever, took work and discipline and commitment. And then once you're finished, I think everyone knows what that can feel like, is being proud. Wow, I've took me a while to complete this, but I've really worked hard. So we can have that sense of accomplishment. And I think that's what I see in my clients, is when they do get better of redirecting negative self-talk, or imposter syndrome type thoughts. When they do get better at recognizing them, self-awareness, recognizing them first, and then learning to redirect. And after they practice this, I can see kind of this light of hope in their eyes that, wow, I can change my brain. I can be better. I can do better at redirecting these negative thoughts. So I know that's very brief, but I believe it is one's commitment to accomplishing something. And if they stay with it, they can improve the quality of their life. I truly believe this. Now, that doesn't mean if they stick with it, they're going to live in Peter Pan world like Tinkerbell and everything's going to be nice and fun. No. They just get better at handling adversity in the world, handling their own stress and anxiety, being more attentive or observative of those around them that they care about. So that's what I think why therapy works for some folks, is they are committed. It's a commitment to themselves and better mental health. Therapy that doesn't work for people, well, therapy is not the only way to help work through difficult situations in life. And so I think it's one of the better ways is it's talk. We're humans. We starve for connection. And so if we don't have it in our life, it helps to go talk to a professional. Even though it's a professional relationship, we can feel like someone's listening. They hear me. And so that's a few thoughts on why I think it works. I'm going to cover some of the things that therapists may do to help someone in a session. And people, there are thousands of them. So I'm only touching on a few things here. And then we'll wrap up our talk on why therapy works. So some of the elements of different psychotherapies may include helping a person become aware of the ways they're thinking. And so that's really kind of what I've been talking about. Some of these automatic thoughts, being able to notice them and then redirect. So a therapist or counselor might help a person to find ways to question these thoughts. Why am I saying that to myself? I'm noticing how this is affecting my behavior and my emotions. How can I change this? So a therapist will help their clients start recognizing that and thinking of ways to challenge some of those negative thoughts. Another element of help might be identifying ways to cope with stress and developing specific problem-solving strategies. So this could be any number of things. With my clients, we might do a mindfulness body scan. Then I usually try to get the client to come up with problem-solving strategies. I may challenge them or make a suggestion, but it sticks better if they come up with it. Examining a person's interactions with others and sometimes offering guidance with communication skills. To me, the one word that defines a healthy, or one word you can use to define a healthy relationship between partners is communication. You got to be able to talk about things without screaming and yelling. Now, we can all I think arguments are healthy for couples, but we don't want to lose control. We don't want to lose our temper. So that's just my piece on that. And again, we'll explore more of that when we get to relationship mini-series. Mindfulness and relaxation techniques are another way to help someone calm themselves down. They can do this with breathing exercises or just be grounded with one of the 5 senses. I use that a lot in my practice. And so another thing is tracking emotions and behaviors to raise awareness and impact of each on each other. And so if I get upset and then I notice I'm snippy, so that I'm upset, irritated at my mate, so I'm a little frustrated, emotion. And then when they get home from work, I'm snippy or very terse, short, maybe snap at them. Well, it's being aware of how these two things interact. Instead of being snippy, I might say, we need to talk. I'm really disappointed that you forgot to pick the kids up at school, or whatever that issue is. Being able to recognize my emotion before maybe some negative behavior. And sometimes supportive counseling helps people explore troubling issues and provide emotional support. Sometimes a person only needs a couple of sessions to kind of work through some issues that are really challenging for them at that time. And so maybe they just need someone to listen. I'm just amazed at there's the resilience of people, and there's people out there that do not have support systems. And lastly, creating a safety plan to help someone who has thoughts of self-harm or suicide. Also, we try to recognize warning signs and help clients use coping strategies, such as contacting friends, family, or emergency personnel, depending on where they are, what their frame of mind is at that time. And so, initially I thought about going in some different types of therapy, but today I think we'll just stick with that just therapy overall and why I think it works. And just to come back to that, I just believe it's because if someone makes a commitment to themselves, they do the work, meaning apply what they've learned or come up with their own things to make change in their personal life, they can feel a sense of accomplishment. And let me tell you, it's not going to look pretty for most of us. We are the way we are as adults over many years of negative or negative behavior, negative thoughts. Well, there's also positive behavior and positive thoughts. And so as we get older and we realize maybe there's some dysfunction in our life, then we can work toward eliminating that or lessening that so we can be more positive. And so therefore we can be more confident in who we are, and our also understanding that we are in the control of how we think and how we behave. It's us. It's no one else's fault or responsibility than our own. And so with that, I'm going to close today with my thoughts. This episode was a little longer than I planned, but I felt like I was rambling, so hopefully I didn't lose too many of you. And so thanks for listening, and please hit that follow button so you can be made aware when other episodes are released. The next episode and the final episode of this Introduction to Mental Health mini-series, we're going to talk about medications and mental health. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm just going to come from a perspective of medications and the therapist and my insight or opinion on how medications and therapy work or don't work. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I wish you all peace and good mental health. I'd like to give special thanks to my IT support, Suze Dukic, and for my music called Furry Friends by Scott Holmes Music. Thank you.